Thank you for being here, guys. Really excited to talk about this subject because it is the backbone of everything I do. It's the body electric. I did prepare a slide deck. I'm going to run through my personal story in about a minute just so you can get a flavor and context for how I got into all of this. So everyone, by the way, that's my new book on the left. Quick shout out for myself, the Vitality Code. And the subtitle is 4 Pillars to Reverse Engineer Illness, Heal Inflammation, and Ignite Your Life Force Energy. So as you might know, anyone who works in holistic health comes with their own story of healing. I'll keep this to about a minute just to kind of keep your attention. So I had about 30 years worth of eczema, and I was always given the same kind of treatments. We never addressed the underlying cause of why I had eczema. So it was, throughout childhood, my teenage years, late 20s, and it wasn't until my dad suffered a stroke when I actually realized that the underlying cause of his stroke and the hypertension that led to his stroke was actually behind the eczema I'd had my whole life, and also the asthma he'd had since he was 12, which is a fully reversible condition. So since 2015, my focus has been helping people to reverse chronic inflammatory health conditions. And there's really almost every illness you can think of is rooted in this one underlying cause. Pick a chronic illness, any chronic illness, it starts with chronic inflammation. And in its simplest form, it can be described as toxicity and or chronic stress and deficiency in essential cell fuels. So that's a very broad, simplified version. And I just wanted to begin with that because it helps to set the context, hopefully. So I see any kind of chronic illness as a chronic symptom of an underlying cause, much like your car dash warning lights will say, tend to your engine, the oil light is on, time to go and pay attention, see what's happening, is it time for an oil change, get under the hood, figure out why the body has fallen out of balance. So that's how I see the body, and that's how I've been working with people since about 2015, actually. So the body electric. In 2017, another story quickly, I was living in LA and I was really what I would consider in top physical health. I was very strict anti-inflammatory diet, I was exercising, I was drinking vegetable juices every day, I was doing yoga, I was high intensity interval training, I was getting plenty of sunlight, and I had this cold that I just could not shake off. And it wasn't a really serious illness, but it was something that was getting really annoying. And for me, that was very unusual because I never got sick. Or if I did, I'd beat it or bat it within a couple of days. And my business partner and friend said to me, why don't you go and see this guy down in Costa Mesa? And he helped me turn around my health in 3 months. So I did. And very quickly, within 10 minutes of testing me, he said, the 3 teeth where you hold your phone have become depolarized, dropping the voltage to your immune system. And I looked at him like he was some kind of alien from outer space. What are you talking about? Because this whole concept of the body electric was brand new to me. And he said, our teeth act like circuit breakers. We are literally wired up like a house with different organs on different circuits, and our teeth are circuit breakers. And what's happening with a lot of people with the cell phone radiation, the EMFs, is dropping or flipping the polarity in the tooth and dropping the voltage to our vital organs, which is very interesting to me because I used to be an electrician. So when I started to dive into the theories and fundamentals of the body electric, things started to become clearer. And the treatment, believe it or not, to write or flip the polarity back to a net negative charge, which we'll come on to in a moment, was scalar energy lasers. Didn't change my diet, didn't start exercising more. It was lasers, and in a couple of sessions, my cold went away. The polarity went back to normal in my teeth, and I was fine. It left me thinking, how many people are experiencing a compromised immune system because of the EMFs? And there's many other reasons as well. So we're wired up like a house, different organs on different circuits, and every circuit passes through our teeth. This is a tooth chart, which I bring into my work with my clients, and several weeks in, because there's a number of things we start with first. But I'll give an example of one client who had type 1 diabetes, which is when the pancreas doesn't fire properly. It's not operating correctly. Western medicine's typical approach is insulin to give the body the insulin it needs. And in the holistic approach and the body electric approach, one would say, why is there not enough power going to the pancreas? Another example might be the thyroid. If you have Graves or Hashimoto's, which is overactive or underactive thyroid, it means there's not enough power going to that, much like there's not enough power going to a flickering light in your living room. As an electrician with the flickering light, my job would be to reverse engineer why there's not enough power going to that light. And I do the same thing with the body. So we can actually cross-check teeth with symptoms. Not always is there a correlation, but very often there's a correlation. And things like mercury drop the voltage, as well as other things. Infected root canals and other kind of cavitations can drop the voltage in those respective circuits. So we can do a cross-check and see what happens. So I'll give an example of a client. He had type 1 diabetes, and we found mercury. He had 4 mercury fillings, and every one of them was on the pancreas circuit. So naturally, we went about getting the mercury removed, and very safely, of course, with functional medicine, or rather holistic dentistry, biological dentistry, and they removed the mercury incredibly carefully, because if it's not done carefully, it can lead to a lot of problems. It can lead to mercury poisoning if not done properly. So we are more electrical than most people realize. We are electrical before we're chemical. Everything about us is electrical. The way the heart operates, the brain, our emotions, every emotion has a different frequency. Every time we move a limb, that's an electrical impulse. We're 50 to 100 trillion cells, depending on which cell biologist you talk to. I often talk about Bruce Lipton, who recently featured in my book, actually. I call him the father of epigenetics. And he talks about 50 trillion cells and how every one of our cells behaves like a biological mini-me. So meaning they have all the same biological processes as we do. And when the body is functioning optimally, we have electrical flow throughout every single one of our cells, and we have an optimal body. So very simplistically, we need to ensure that we're getting sufficient cell fuels and not too toxic, and we release trapped emotions, which I'll come on to in a moment. If there's one takeaway from this whole presentation I can encourage you to learn, because it might flip your perception of what any illness is a characteristic of all illness is low voltage to an organ, or low voltage in an organ. So any name of illness is related to an organ. Think about not enough power getting to that organ, instead of the notion of genetic diseases or incurable illnesses, which has largely been superseded by the science of epigenetics. I mentioned Bruce Lipton just earlier. He's a real pioneer in this space. It's the environment in the body that signals the genes. It's not the genes that trigger the illness. And I'm saying that because when we understand that, we can move away from the principle of incurable and think, hang on, how can I raise the voltage in the organs affected again? What's standing in the way of that power getting to that essential organ? So this is quite a cool bit. Well, I geek out on this stuff because I don't know how my mind works, but I used to be an electrician, which helps. So we have different battery packs. The muscles are one of the largest battery packs in the body. And they are stacked one on top of the other. And they have a piezoelectric effect, which means that when we stress them, when we mechanically work them, they emit electrons, which means we generate electricity in the body when we work out. This is one reason why we always feel energized after a workout. And obviously, it depends on the kind of workout that we do. If we do endurance for hours and hours, sometimes we might not feel energized after that. But if you do short stints, I'm a huge fan of high intensity and lifting and body weight training. I always feel energized, and it's amazing for testosterone as well, of course. So muscles are battery packs. It's where we store the electricity, much like a battery. Cell membranes is another battery. Mitochondria is regarded as the energy of the cell. It's the battery of the cell. And then inside the cell, we have the DNA. And the DNA, the helix, is a golden mean. And that stores energy, and it actually absorbs energy from scalar energy from the field, the quantum field, as we sometimes call it. So we have four main areas where we generate electricity and create and store it. Now, this is going a bit technical. I've really tried to simplify it because with limited time. Think of all of these cells in the body with 50 to 100 trillion cells. And providing we are operating effectively and optimally, they function between that should be minus 20 and minus 25 millivolts. I learned this from Dr. Jerry Tennant, who I reference in my book. And that's when everything is optimal. If we get sick or we have an injury, we injure our thumb, the voltage needs to actually drop to minus 50 millivolts in order to repair. And it's like an inverse relationship. We think if it's less, it means less, but it's actually more if it's a net negative charge. The trouble is when we become positively charged, and that's when the body becomes more acidic, because when it's a net negative charge, the body is in a more alkaline state. And when it's acidic, it becomes more positively charged. This actually goes back to the pH scale and 0 to 14. In fact, the way Dr. Jerry Tennant and other cell biologists have reached this is using a logarithmic scale of the acid-alkaline pH scale. So that's getting a bit technical, but let's just say we need to have a net negative charge to be healthy. If it becomes positively charged, that's when we get sick. And we know that at plus 30 millivolts, that's where cancer is created. And that's when you have the uncontrolled proliferation of cells, when all the cells are actually they're craving oxygen because the voltage has dropped so much, they've become so overworked, toxic, and or deficient in cell fuels. And the uncontrolled proliferation of cells is what's happening. It's a drop in voltage and the drop in oxygen. So in order to be healthy, the body is always having to deal with toxins. Sadly, we do live in a bit of a toxic world. And we need to do what we can to detoxify the body as much as we can. And preferably daily. You guys know I lead the breath work every morning. That's one way to detoxify. We actually exhale 70% of our toxins through breath. Another way of detoxifying is by moving, exercising, sweating. The lymphatic system requires for the body to move. Many reasons why the body needs to move. And then there's other detoxification organs as well. But there's major toxins that we need to take care of. Heavy metals are a big one. Mold exposure is another one. GMOs, that kind of thing. Tooth infections and mercury, like I mentioned earlier. So very simplistically, the way I talk about reverse engineering illness is just by kind of taking a zoomed out approach and saying, okay, what's not happening in the body for the body to optimize or to function optimally? And it's normally a mixture of these things. Insufficient cell fuel. So what does it take to optimize the body? Sufficient cell fuels. We need to understand what cell fuels we need. Oxygen, water, nutrients. We need to be able to eliminate waste. We need to be grounded. We need to have sunlight. We need sleep. And then we need to minimize toxins. We need to release trapped emotions. That's a really simplified overview. So oxygenate, water, food. Let thy food be thy medicine be thy food. We need to be able to detoxify in order to optimize the voltage and the flow of electricity around the body. We need to be grounding. This is scientifically proven to reduce inflammation in the body. And we need sufficient sleep. And we need to release trapped emotions. So I've said a lot, and I'm going to finish it there. There's a much longer explanation of all of this on my YouTube channel. These are the 4 pillars we work on. I'm going to stop it there because I've realized the time. Do we have any questions?
You may have already answered my question. God, so I love this area too, Neil, so I could go for hours, but you said the basic cause of any illness is inflammation. What causes inflammation? And I guess you've kind of answered that.
My simplified version is when the body is exposed to any kind of threat, whether it's a physical threat or a perceived threat, that's when the body's immune system, which is a very healthy immune response, when we have inflammation, it's as if the immune system is protecting us from foreign or alien intruders. It's the army protecting us. It's a very healthy response. But when it happens again and again and again, that's when the body starts to create symptoms depending on our genetic code. And the other one, the perceived threat, is chronic stress. So when we're living in fight or flight and we're living by the hormones of stress, on a when that's chronic, it becomes a chronic situation. Short bouts of stress can be a good thing, but it's not. It's the chronic situation with stress that leads to chronic illness, and it's often spoken about how 90% of illness is down to chronic stress. So those are the two main things. It's basically toxins and chronic stress and deficiency in cell fuels that creates inflammation.
So the inflammation, I mean, to me, isn't the cause of the illness, it's the warning sign.
Yes. So I talk about how it's like the underlying cause. So if there's like a tree and the symptoms all here, you've got inflammation a bit in the middle, and then underneath you've got the true causes. Is it mercury? Is it another toxin? Is it whatever? And then above the inflammation, you've got all these different types of symptoms. So chronic inflammation is symptomatic of toxicity and stress, if you like, if you really want to simplify it. And then above the chronic inflammation, you have all the different symptoms.
Right.
Does that make sense? I'll often share this with a graphic. Fred.
Yeah, Neil, I'm glad you mentioned at the end there how important our emotional state is, and that we have to learn to let go of as well. One of the reasons we age differently than other species of animals, like dogs, for instance, live to be 7 times their maturity rate. They live to be 14, 15 years old. We as humans should be living to be 130, 140 years old, but we don't, because we beat the crap out of ourselves. We hold on to our emotional baggage, and it ages us. We hold on to resentments and angers. We also hold on to sentimentality and nostalgia and all of that. Totally. So the idea is to allow anything that comes and goes to pass through us. And I just want to leave you with that.
Yeah. And related to that, the organs weep the tears the eyes refuse to shed. One of my favorite quotes by William Osler. If we don't release that trapped energy, it gets stored. 15 seconds, Jared, if you're there.
Do you have a checklist of the things you mentioned on your website or on YouTube? Like all the things.
Checklist, great question. I was going to say in my book, I'm creating a checklist right now.